Okay, cool. So today we are here to talk about the cryptocurrency security standard. We're going to be discussing all things about version 9, which is our latest version that has just recently come out. So my name is Jessica Levesque, and I am here today with a couple of CCSS committee members and then also some from our advocacy group. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to go through some of the updates to version 9, which came out, I think, about a month ago. It's been kind of a whirlwind, but some of the updates to it include some stronger security requirements, support for DeFi, support for single signers, better governance measures, threat modeling and risk management, and a bunch of other stuff. But I think the bottom line is that this isn't just about rules on the page. This is about a community that has come together to build this standard and to keep working on it to make cryptocurrency systems as safe as they can be. So without further ado, let's do introductions from why don't actually we start with you, Dirk, since you're our CCSS steering committee chair, and then we'll go around kind of round robin. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. As Jess said, I'm the chair of the CCSS guidance committee. Hopefully, you'll be hearing not very much from me today because I think I'm as interested as the people watching this are to really kind of understand the feedback from some of the other key stakeholders on the call today. I'm also the founder of Imagine Crypto, and yeah, I've been with C4 for I don't know, 5, 6 years now I've been working with them. I used to be the chair of the Certified Bitcoin Professional Committee in the past, and I just have a strong belief in both the education of folks around the ecosystem as well as the security of our assets in the ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's been like we met 6 years ago, Dirk, and it's been well over that since you were helping with different various things, I think, for C4. So you have been an incredible volunteer. So thank you. All right, Mark, New Zealand. I like you
Yes,
added it.
yes, I live in New Zealand, down at the bottom of the world. I'm also a CCSS steering committee member, but I'm also an auditor as well. And I work for a company called Six Blocks Audit, so I'm the associate director there. And I was helping with the development of the standard as CCSS V9, as it's known.
Awesome. Okay, why don't we move over to Charnay well, I'll let you say where you're from. I'm not going to introduce you as I ask you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanae van Heerden. I'm the head of audit at Provenance. I'm also a CCSS auditor and part of this advocacy group. Been involved in a couple of peer reviews and also helped shape the peer review template. Thanks for everybody that's listening to us today. Yeah, and I'm from South Africa, just noting.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Will?
Hey everyone, I'm Will. I'm actually coming from New York here. I'm an enterprise engineer for Halborn. I've been in the security space for almost 10 years now, and I've been a CCSSA for 2 years, I believe. And I was also helping with the development of some of the new requirements of version 9.
Yep. All right. Dimitro.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm the head of compliance from the Hacken. It is the Web3 security firm for the auditing. We do a couple of auditing, but my background includes the penetration testing background. Before that, I conducted several audits in the ISO 27001, PCI DSS, and other popular frameworks. And now I'm also 2 years experience at CCSA. And I also passed a peer review with the mark. That's why I'm on the solid level, actually, on conducting all the audits. So yeah, let's see.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it. CCSS really is a community built standard. And I think it's good to show that what's happening behind the scenes is actually what we're saying is happening. We're a pretty transparent organization. And this is a good way for us to look into how we gather feedback, how we've built this community, how we have advocates for this for the standard. And then we've got the steering committee members as well that volunteer. So why don't we start by just talking about what the CCSS is? And it's been around since 2014, but I think it was first officially published in 2015, even though it was written prior to that. So that's over 10 years that it's been around. So obviously, in order for it to still be relevant, it has shifted and changed because, as we know, crypto is different today than it was yesterday because it moves so quickly. So Dirk, do you want to talk a little bit about this progression and what the standard has looked like over time?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things to keep in mind is that the CCSS is an open standard, and as we've already mentioned here a couple times, right, it's a community-driven standard. I love that the fact that the community is global, as represented here on this call, right? This is not a U.S. standard. This is not a British standard society standard, right? This is a global standard driven by the community not being geographic, but being those folks that are involved in blockchain and cryptocurrency. So it has evolved over time, as Jess said, through the input of that community. Um, you don't have to pay to download a copy of the CCSS. It's freely available to everybody. And the requirements and the controls that are discussed in it themselves are not created by any particular interest or any particular group of interests, even, but just by the community itself. So I think that's what makes it so valuable and so interesting, and why I'm interested and have been interested in being a part of it for so long, is that that it really is just representing the best practices and the best intelligence of the folks that are out there actually doing the work.
Yeah, that's really well said, Dirk. Okay, so it's community driven. There's not a commercial interest in it. It's run by a nonprofit, and we have volunteers who are helping write it. So we've kind of set the scene for where we're at with the CCSS. But you might be wondering, okay, we talk about how it's community driven, but how do we actually get this feedback from the community? How do we build that into the standard rather than just saying it's community driven? So why don't we talk a little bit about what that looks like for pulling information and kind of crowdsourcing these ideas? Mark and Will, do you want to get us started on it? Because Mark actually, I don't think you said this, but before Mark became part of the steering committee, he involved himself in the standard. I can remember, I've talked to you about this, Mark. I was visiting my grandma, and one of the other people at C4 was like, there's this guy, Mark, he sent some emails, you really need to talk to him. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I talked to him, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have answered and like gotten like the day of, like, what a wealth of information. And so once we connected and started to, hear his ideas, and then he became more involved, and then eventually he became part of the steering committee. But it was through his own, we didn't seek him out. He, seeked us out, and then we got to where we are now, which I think shows how anyone can get involved. So Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about that and just the update process in general?
Yeah, I mean, what we did was, I think it was July 2024, the steering committee decided that we were going to do a full review of the standard as it stood, which was version 8.1, and that we were going to probably make some changes because we'd received feedback, unsolicited feedback, which was fantastic. And so we decided that we were going to review the feedback and update the standard, because some of these ideas that we got from the community were really good. And so what we did is we actually said, well, let's just open it up. Let's just tell everyone that we're reviewing the standard. So we sent out emails and social media messages just to say, hey, we're looking at the standard. Here's a form. Please provide us with any comments, suggestions, whatever, and we'll take a look at them and we'll reflect them in the standard. And so that was July 2024. We got so much feedback from people around the world, not only just, CCSAs, the auditors, the organizations that already have CCSS systems certified, but people in cryptography, people in information security, people who just basically trade in crypto and wanted something more safe environment to work in. And basically the feedback that we got was so numerous and so good that we had to keep changing the dates that we were going to release version 8.2, it was, as it was known, as it was planned for. And we got to a stage in December 2024 where we had made over 1,000 individual changes to the standard. So that's like over 1,000 individual changes to the standard. In December, we decided, okay, this is, it's really good. We've got a lot of information in there now, a lot of enhancements, a lot of updates. So let's release the standard now. But again, 1,000 individual changes. We just couldn't call it version 8.2. So we decided to go up to the next level of versioning, which is basically a massive significant change, and we called it V9. So really, literally all of the updates to the standard have come from the community. There's some bits and pieces that have come from auditors, but generally it's just people around the world submitting their suggestions. And that basically shows with CCSS that, it's open community. There's no, basically there's no requirements in terms of who contributes and so forth, as Dirk mentioned. So we've come up with we've received some really good ideas. And, as part of this discussion, you'll see some of these ideas that have been implemented that come from the community. So basically, we're going to do a 3-month review. So right now we're in the 3-month review period where people can again submit suggestions and comments about V9, and we'll take those on board and we'll look at updating the standard as well.
Yeah, you know what I'd be interested in hearing is, and I don't think I've asked you guys this, but Charnay and Will, Dimitro, specifically when you're in the advocacy group calls and we're talking about what's happened in the steering committee, you're talking about the stakeholders and you've got the same documents, what is that like from your perspective when we're bringing you, like, this is what they're looking at maybe adding to? What do you think about this, and asking for your feedback in these kind of like informal calls?
No, yeah, that's actually really interesting part about it. I think I want to just take a step back and talk about the process just 1 second and kind of bring focus into how iterative it is, right? Like Mark mentioned, we're getting tons of feedback from stakeholders all over the world. So what they do is we bring it internally, discuss it among the steering committee, discuss it among the advocacy group, and then, determine the desired changes, the best desired changes from there. And it is really cool because like once these ideas come in, even if, not everybody is, I'll talk about, smart contract stuff, even though not everybody in this project is, super familiar with smart contracts at a technical level, that gives us a chance to kind of throw in, a little bit of hands-on expertise. We deal with it every day. Maybe there's certain misunderstandings that we can clear up too. So it's a really good process all around.
Yeah, from my side, I want to add that the opportunity to send you a feedback and to get any advice from your perspective as the developer of the framework, it is a really insane thing that I look and see maybe the first time, because we know actually that in Web3 basic project, there are so much updates, there are so new protocols, so new software, any other things, new startups each day, each time, each hour, and so on. And it is a really big challenge for any of the auditor from the low level skill, from the high level skill, to apply controls from the standard to technology you actually check. So that's why this feedback session, it is the mandatory, I think, because by them you are avoiding mistakes. You don't just write in your report and hope is everything will be good or no. You will pass the peer review or no. You have the opportunity to check everything before, so it is very good.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything Will and Dimitro said, and also just from a practical perspective of actually doing the audits, it's so great. It's not this unattainable standard that's just set there and you need to interpret it and do it. So you can actually come back, questions in the audit. Well, this is the standard, but this is actually not working in practice, or I have this questions as an auditor, and then that feedback is actually taken. Like, okay, maybe we need to get a guide, because other auditors also have these questions, or this is not possible to test it in this way, so maybe we need to switch the requirement a bit. So yeah, it's just really great that this collaborative process, and it takes all our feedback into account.
Yeah, and I think being able to bring those questions and for us to say, you know what, we don't have a perfect answer because this is evolving and growing, and then saying we're going to find that answer and we're going to come together to figure this out says a lot about, I think, the Web3 community as a whole and all working together in it, and then as well just the community members who are participating in this standard specifically. Should we talk a little, well, actually, is there any? Yeah.
Real quick, Jess. I was going to say one of the things I think that that was kind of mentioned there that I think is worth kind of drawing attention to is it's not just the structure of the standard itself, right? That the feedback has impacted the implementation guide and the process for doing the CCSS audits. The feedback comes in around the entire thing, not just specific individual requirements of the standard itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As the executive director at C4, I promise you, we get things all the time that are like, how do we do this? I'm like, ooh, we need to add that to the auditor guide. It's not just me deciding what should be in it. It's people who are doing the audits coming with questions and us realizing we need to add this in. And people that have done audits for a long time, like Mark, saying this is what they do with PCI DSS, and as a QSA, this is what I'm given. I need this, or we should be providing this. And so I think that that's, yeah, a really big part of it. Okay, so when we started, Mark said that there were over 1,000 changes. If anyone wants to just have the time of your life, you can scroll through all of the changes that we have in the document. What a joy. But we won't make you do that in this. What we'll do, though, is just go through and talk about some of those changes. And one of the big things that happened was some just, one word choice or a couple words that we switched for something else. And that seems like a small thing, but let me tell you, when you've got a whole community of people sharing ideas that then go to another community that's put into a committee, it is a lot of talk to just change a word or a phrase. So why don't we talk about a few of those changes specifically, and then we'll get into more of the specific standards, but some of the bigger overhauls. Mark, do you want to get us started on some of the wording in the requirements?
Sure. As a bit of a background, what we did as part of this review is look at each requirement and see if it's future-proof. So, for example, when I was auditing Fireblocks, it's publicly known they use MPC. And if you look at version 8.1 of the standard, it talks about private keys, it talks about multi-sig wallets, and the fact that, there's more than one private key to a wallet. And when with the Fireblocks audit, it was, well, they use MPC, right? So it's just theoretically one private key that's there. So I had to go back to the steering committee because I wasn't a member at the time and say, hey, they're using MPC, the requirements talking about it's inferring that there's more than one private key. How does this work? And so, of course, the steering committee came back and said, well, the wording is structured in such a way, but of course we support MPC because each shard can be considered as a private key in itself. So that's the type of things that we're looking at in the review is how can we future-proof the standard with new technologies that may appear, as Dimitri talked about, there's new stuff all the time. And you've got to try and keep up with this stuff, right? So the best thing for a standard is to make it future-proof. And in that, how you do that is you actually look at the wording that you use in the standard. So for example, in version 8.1, we always used key, seed, or interchangeably key, seeds, whatever, right? So seeds and keys. So what we did in version 9 is we basically just replaced all of those terms with one term called key material. And that really reflects the fact that we're talking about anything that's related to cryptography in the sense of signing transactions and so forth. So it includes keys, it includes seeds, and it includes phrases and everything, right? So, and anything else that comes up in future. We also got rid of multi-sig because we were deciding, well, currently you sign a transaction with your private key, but in future there might be something completely different. We just don't know anymore. So what we did there is we replaced it with multi-signer. So that again future-proofs the requirement. The other key thing is that, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later on, is that CCSS v9 supports single signer wallets, or as we recall it now, mechanisms, because a signing mechanism can be distinct from the wallet. You know, it doesn't have to be in the same software wallet environment. The signing process can actually be higher up at another level. So we got rid of multi-sig and we put in multi-signer. A couple of other things in the standard, we had some peppering of must and should in the requirements. And of course, if you put in should, it can actually confuse people and think that, well, should means optional. But every requirement in CCSS is mandatory if it applies to the environment, right? So we got rid of all the shoulds and all the musts, just to stop the confusion. Other things like we talk about staff, we talk about users. So we replaced it with personnel because personnel is more higher level. It talks about contractors, it talks about third-party service providers, anyone who can impact the security of the environment. And we also interchanged creation with generation as well in a lot of the requirements in CCSS 8.1. So we replaced that and just everything is now just generation. And I think there's a few other bits and pieces, but that's the high level ones.
Yeah, I think if you went through every single one, we would be here for, 7 years. So I think that that was a good rundown of some of the important changes that were significant throughout that are just smaller word choices. And as you were talking, Mark, I was thinking about how, most people who are, well, just about anyone in Web3, you came from somewhere else. So I was thinking while you're doing this, my master's is in English, and it's like, how does this apply? As soon as you start talking about the words, it's like, I have written papers over the difference between choosing this word or this word. And that's really what it is in a standard. If you write one word different, it can be interpreted so differently by everyone else. So the committee advocacy group will sit there and really discuss, what is this one word connote versus this word? Should we switch it around? And what would be the most useful in terms of making the standard as good as possible and the space as secure as possible, which is the ultimate goal. And we talked a little bit about how things grow and change within the standard alongside the community and what's happening with the tech. And we don't always know what's going to happen, but sometimes we're trying to future-proof. Sometimes something has come up as a new tech and we need to add it into the standard. And so one of the things when the standard was created, DeFi was not a term. People didn't know about DeFi. DeFi is now everywhere. And smart contracts, we talked a little bit about that, but there have been a number of different requirements added because of emerging security challenges. And smart contracts is now something that is in the standard. And we alluded to this earlier, and maybe, Will, you mentioned it, but we came to Will and said, this is what this, actually, I don't even know how it came about. Did you come to us, Will? Did the steering committee bring it to you? How do you remember how this all kind of came about? I just know you wrote this requirement.
I'm not 100% sure. I know me and Mark were going back and forth on it for a while, but I don't remember how it started exactly.
That's like, so shows our point. So yes, but do you want to talk a little bit about what this requirement is about and how you participate in writing it?
Yeah, for sure. So there's actually to do with smart contracts in this new standard version of the standard. There's 3 requirements, right? They all kind of complement each other. But they make absolute sense when you think about the fact that like a lot of the security breaches that have happened because of vulnerabilities in smart contracts, right? So the first requirement is basically the smart contracts need to be audited by a relevant or a competent company, right? Third party. So and there's a caveat to that. It's not just, any smart contract you use like for testing or whatever. It's the smart contract that is going to be used by your users with real assets at stake, right? And in the standard, I believe it refers to it as a production network, right? Just to kind of keep it aligned with the Web 2 space, I see. Okay. The next one is that the reports, the audit reports on the smart contracts, they need to be available to the stakeholders, right? So anyone who's going to be using this platform or interacting with these smart contracts, they should have accessibility to the reports about the security audits on those contracts. And then the last one is basically all of the medium and higher findings, risk categories, right? The findings need to be remediated. All that information is going to be in the report so that, you know, stakeholders can actually review, you know, where were the weaknesses that were found in this, you know, smart contract? What were the remediation efforts to fix those issues? And then do I feel comfortable with all of that, you know, using my digital assets with those smart contracts? So like I said, they kind of complement each other. They are very basic security requirements, but very powerful once you get them going.
Yeah, if you forget the basics, then what's the point of the rest of it? You
Yeah.
have to have it from the bottom up, top down, all of that. Dimitri, is there anything you wanted to jump in and add about the smart contract requirement or it being added in general?
So actually, it is the sum of the requirements we are waiting for before. Because as previously said by Will, that there are lots of, if you will read any of the external reports prepared for 2024, for 2023 years, we see that there are a lot of vulnerabilities. There are a lot of actually guides how to search for such vulnerabilities, and a lot of any of the database of the known and public exploits for the smart contract. That's why it's actually pretty critical topic nowadays, because it actually not a Web 2 infrastructure vulnerability where it can break the user experience, for example, yes, or just steal the cookie. It can steal all of the money, it can drone the wallets and so on. That's why it's really significant update here. Because for now it seems like more applicable with the different sides of the trusted environment scopes. So
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Steal the cookie. Okay, so let's jump into the next part. And just so some of this might seem segmented as we're moving from requirement to requirement, but I think that's important as we just kind of step through all of these different changes and how the community was involved in making this the newest version. So Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the key management processes and how that's changed a little bit?
One of the new requirements that we put in is pretty much stock standard in terms of key management, like for other security standards, PCI DSS, ISO 27001, and that's where we put in a requirement that the signing keys or components are stored at rest in a secure environment. So, for example, an HSM or a trusted execution environment, there's cases where the signing keys have been stored in databases or on file systems and so forth, and in some cases are not protected. So we decided that a requirement should be introduced that the keys are in a secure enclave, trusted execution environment, or an HSM, right? So it avoids the possibility of having the keys stolen when they're sitting on file systems or unencrypted in databases, or even worrying about the database, whether the encryption of the database is set or whether the keys are encrypted. The other key thing there is, and obviously Will and Dimitrio can talk about this because they're penetration testers as well, is that when keys are going to be used for signing, in some cases they are actually decrypted to be used. Now, the key could be, if it's used in an unsecure environment, such as it's been taken out of the database, it's unencrypted, it's in memory, it's going to be ready to start signing stuff. If there is a process within the operating system or in the application stack that's been breached, it's been compromised, it's been taken over by a malicious actor, that the process that's using the key to sign could be attacked by this process that's been overtaken by a hacker. So this is the other side of this requirement, in that we're trying to protect the processes that use the keys from malicious processes or other processes that have been overtaken by a hacker. So Dimitri and Will, if you want to talk a bit about that maybe?
I think actually it's not mostly applicable for the penetration testing approach, but maybe more applicable for the malware techniques there. So if you're using the key holder devices with any of the new, for example, zero-day malware of the threads, the risk is still exists with this. So the new requirements is perfectly closes such things. And also, I remember actually that on the version 8.1.2, 8.1 actually, sorry for that. We actually talking with you, Mark, about this requirement, about the FIP standard certification there, and I just wondered, what is it actually? FIP, so 140, what I need to do, what I need to research additionally, just to know is for what is the important things and what we are protected from by this certification also. And now it is in the standard, and now it is pushing, I think, the technology and the protection against such threats.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back to what Mark was talking about with the memory type of attacks, the way the trusted execution environments work is kind of encrypting everything that you are telling it to encrypt. So the way it works to protect from these kind of memory bugs, like Mark said, if there's another process or even the operating system itself that's somehow become compromised, it can then, reach into the memory of other processes and pull private data like a private key out. And when you're trying to sign something, you obviously need that private key in plain text. Now, these trusted execution environments don't actually share any data with the operating system or the other processes. Everything it does is done in an isolated secure chip, and any kind of data it stores is always encrypted. It can only be decrypted within the secure enclave, which absolutely protects it from a compromised process or even operating system. And that's why a protection like that is so powerful.
Anybody else
Yeah.
want to say anything about this before we move on to governance requirements? Mark, did you want to jump in?
Oh, there was just this other, no, Dirk, you go. I've been talking too much.
I was just going to say, and the reason we specifically call out the FIPS 140, right, is that, and we saw this especially in the early days of all the wallets, everybody was saying, oh, we've got the secure chip, installed. And then you put it in the hands of like somebody like Josh Datko, and he will prove to you very, very quickly that that is not, in fact, a secure chip, and you can pull all of the data right off of it. And so
just real quick, if you guys don't know who Josh Datko is, the first time I met him, I was scared very much so because he can break into hardware wallets. And I was like, what? This is the thing. So anyways, if you want to be terrified, look up Josh Datko.
Yeah, you can watch his videos on LinkedIn or whatever. He was on one of the CBP live streams that we did a year or so ago as well, or a couple of years ago, or Jess will tell me it was like a decade. But anyways, yeah, so we just also wanted to incorporate some again, like requiring testing for the smart contracts. We wanted to require some sort of testing and validation that like when somebody says that they're using a secure computing environment that it actually is.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to the key inventory. So we've updated in V9 that the key inventory, so this is where an entity keeps a list of their critical keys, that it's updated or at least, it's reviewed at least annually. And this also comes into governance as well, in that if you have an inventory of critical keys, that, for example, in an incident response situation, everyone's panicking, everyone's losing it. There's something going on, there's an ongoing attack, that you can refer to the key inventory in a stressful situation and understand exactly where are the critical keys, what are they, where are they, who has access to them, and you can actually use that as a guide in terms of, well, let's go and check the critical keys, make sure that they're protected, maybe we move them out of the way, whatever. So we added in version 9 the fact that you should be reviewing the key inventory annually. And this merges into governance, where this is a new aspect that we've introduced into V9, where we hold a accountability to certain roles. And one of the governance requirements is that executive management should be aware of the risks that are in their environment. A classic example is the techs decide to put in a single signer mechanism, or single sig wallet, a hot wallet, for example, and the executive management don't know about this. They don't know the risks. They don't understand the risks of introducing a single signature wallet or a single signer mechanism into the environment. They have no clue. So when something bad happens and people look for accountability, the executive management or the board say, well, we didn't have a clue. So what we did is we introduced accountability at the executive management level for the entity to actually understand the risks that are involved and acknowledge the fact that they know that there's risks within their environment based on certain architectures. And what we want to really do there is that looking at executive management, they normally do the strategic and vision of the company, and therefore they should be looking at this in terms of the information security as well. How are we protecting ourselves against attack? It comes up from the executive management level in terms of, well, what's the strategy, what's the vision? So we did that as well. Another key piece there is that we introduced risk management and threat modeling in the governance aspect. And so this goes back to the review of the key inventory annually. It can be annually, we say at least, but for example, if your risk management decides that we change our critical keys quite a lot, or we add to them quite a lot, that a risk management assessment should say that, well, actually, maybe we should review the key inventory every quarter, because we need to understand that, if there's a lot of keys that have been adding to the inventory or been taken out, we need to understand, have we ensured that all the users that had access to that key have been revoked, the privileges have been revoked and so forth. So that's another important piece that we've added to the governance aspect. And the third one is service provider management. So I don't know how many PCI DSS cases I've been involved with where an organization gets breached and all their credit card information for their customers leaks out. And, the forensic investigation actually pointed it to one of their service providers that had way too much access, didn't have an information security program, and basically was a backdoor into the organization. So we enhanced the standard to actually reflect that your service providers need to be vetted and need to be monitored to ensure that they're taking information security seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not going to let somebody in to clean your house that you have no idea who they are. Why are you letting somebody into your building where your key material is? Yeah, absolutely.
Jumping back real quick to something you asked about earlier, Jess, that's a perfect example of one of the incremental changes that occurred in the CCSS over the years. Was when the CCSS first came out, you as the person being validated had to comply with every single control in the CCSS. There was no kind of accommodation for the fact that, hey, well, I'm utilizing, a service provider to provide this function for me, and along the way, we integrated that understanding that you can have a CCSS validated service provider who's only performing these, this select set of things for you, and that can plug into your overall CCSS validation then. And that was just another one of the ways that the process and the validation has kind of changed over the years.
Yep, totally. Dimitri, did you want to add to anything about the risk management or threat modeling piece?
Yeah, first of all, about the service provider management. When you are starting to conduct such a review using a checklist or a due diligence assessment or something like that, you are starting to know lots of interesting things actually about your service provider, because if you see that your service provider is reject your request about providing such of the public policy or any of the responsibility matrix, you actually on this stage needed to be sure that they haven't any of that you actually requested, because each of the company, if they have something good, if they have the nice security posture, they will loud about it actually with the great sound. So yeah, this is the really quick intro about the service provider management. But if you're talking about the risk management, it is also the one of the requirements what we're waiting for, because sometimes we can see that the lack of some of the general security processes in the company. It is the type of some of the entities or some of the infrastructure, but they actually haven't the basic generic security flows or processes already set it up there. And that's why the risk management, I think it needed to be a driver to actually set up security tools, like management security tools and technical security measures to avoid such risk. And also, it's not only the project driver to sell of the security tools or to implement more, it also the instrument to show to the management what actually the threat vectors we have and why we need to buy this, for example, login and monitoring system, why we need this for the blockchain state. We have the requirements, but also we have the like possible or potential incident and threats for that. That's why we need to buy it first. Yes, and I also think that each audit needs to be started from the checking the risk management actually, not for the dive deeply. If you haven't this, it is a real problem. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be aware of all of these things, who's coming into this space. And yeah, there's so many different components to it. Why don't we move into talking a little bit about logging and log records of events, which I believe ties into this a bit as well. Sharnay, do you want to get us started?
Yes, thank you, Jess. It definitely ties into the governance and the risk management aspect, especially. Both very important. I always like to think of governance as kind of the captain that steers the ship. That's where everything starts, and then it waterfalls down. And then the risk management, especially, you need to know where your risks are so you can actually start to mitigate them. And that's actually also important for this logging and monitoring part. So the new requirement, we already had the fact that there should be audit logs and there should be backups. But in the new version 9.0, we actually added the monitoring aspect as well, which I think is very important. And just to put it very basically, discussed it with a colleague earlier this week, and I know of you guys in the advocacy as well. It's like having logging without monitoring is like having cameras but never watching the footage. Imagine having a security cameras in a high security vault. The camera logs, records everything, but no one is watching the footage or monitoring it. It's not very useful. You can go back, see what happened, but by then the damage might already be done. So the proactive monitoring allows for immediate action, reducing risk and identifying vulnerabilities before they become major threats. And that's also where the risk management comes in, and it ties to the risk management aspect. So your logging and your monitoring specifically should be tailored to the threat model, because sometimes based on certain aspects, there can be a high volume of alerts coming in. So you actually need to determine what is the high risk areas that needs that real time logging. So I think that's a pretty straightforward requirement. And I think what the CCS does well, and touching on what Will said earlier, that the requirements complement each other. That's again evidence here. The CCS doesn't just require logs, it requires a holistic approach that ties the logging, the monitoring, and the risk management together. You need to have the right alerts in place. That means, so instead of reacting after attack, you can maybe prevent it from escalating. I don't know if anyone wants to add on that.
Before anyone adds on, that video camera example, so good. I love that.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to
Yeah.
add on to it? No? Okay, that was really good, Sharnay. Okay, so do we want to talk, I guess, about blockchain state, confirmed and unconfirmed at all within this? Or should we move on to, I don't know, Will, do you want to discuss that? Or should we move on to physical security controls?
Yeah, I could touch on this really quick. So just another requirement on top of the logging that Charnay was just talking about is monitoring for, confirmed and unconfirmed transactions. So basically what it is alluding to is keeping an eye on the blockchain, right? And then being able to react based on anomalous behavior, things you're detecting in here, right? A lot of times we see in these straight, smart contract vulnerabilities, an attacker may send one transaction to make sure his idea or his exploit is going to work, and then send another one to try to, pull a bunch of money out of it. So if you're actively watching that activity, you have a better chance of actually responding to that kind of activity. And the unconfirmed is kind of referring to before the blocks actually hit the chain, before they're actually mined and made permanent. They exist in a state that is temporary, right? It's called a mempool in the EVM world. And you can actually use tools to monitor what's going on there. And in that way, if you've ever heard the term front running, you can potentially identify and front run an attack if you have this monitoring set up and enabled.
Yeah. Anybody else wanted to add to that piece? No?
I suppose that the history to this requirement came from the fact that there's a certain number of businesses out there that actually monitor blockchain state, and they provide a free service where they actually alert the community and also the entity that they believe is actually under attack. They will alert them that there's an ongoing attack, occurring within their wallets and so forth. So we were looking at this, the CCSS steering committee and the advocacy group. We were saying, well, these alerts are really powerful. You're actually alerting to suspicious activity even before the entity knows that something bad's going on with their infrastructure. So we decided to say, well, this is actually a really good information security control, and it adds to the layering approach of security where you ensure that you're not just using one control, you're using many controls, right? So if one control fails, you've got other controls that that are still there working. So the history behind this requirement was it's another awesome control. It actually proves to be quite effective because some of these vendors and so forth are actually providing a community service by alerting the community and the businesses to these types of situations. It really does add value. And so I suppose the other thing too is with the monitoring of the blockchain state and so forth, it's about the wallets that you manage or the transactions that you put onto the blockchain and so forth as well. So this is an interesting requirement. We are obviously seeking feedback about this requirement because it's quite new in terms of information security controls. So it'll be very interesting to see if anyone has any feedback related to this requirement.
Yeah, I put in the chat, and we'll also add to the description how you can contact us to get the form so you can fill it out to give feedback, or really we'll accept feedback. Any way you give it, the form's helpful, but if you send us something, we'll make sure that we keep track of it. We have a few more things, but I'm not sure we have time to cover them all before the end of this. I'm thinking maybe we'll do, if the members are willing to, we could do a follow-up stream where we talk about some of the other pieces, because I don't want us to gloss over the other bits of it. Also, what I was thinking, and maybe we'd want to do this in the next stream. Okay, you guys can all picture what I'm about to say on the call, but everyone else, imagine this massive spreadsheet with, like, I don't know, 20 different tabs, and each one just has constant stuff. That was the main source that we worked on for the standard, pulling in like the stakeholder feedback, all of this different stuff. So it might be kind of fun to screen share, not the whole thing because that would be excessive, but to show you kind of some of the behind the scenes, what we're looking at to it. The advocacy group has access to look at this. Lots of other people do as well, but maybe we should show what is happening behind the scenes and how we put this all together. We won't bore you with the whole thing or make you cry, as spreadsheets are wont to do for people, but we can give you kind of a look into what we're doing behind the scenes to pull all of this together. So I was thinking we can do a follow-up stream where we talk about that and some of the other requirements we didn't cover. Is there anything we didn't cover that's on the agenda that you guys on this call want to make sure that we talk about during this section or session, this part of it, before going to the next? Please jump in. There are no rules within this. We're a community, so if there's anything, please jump in.
I just want to make sure that before we wrap up that that we, once again, we said this when we had the CCSS committee call a couple of weeks ago on the updates of version 9, but just a massive thanks to the entire community, obviously to the folks on this call for their involvement, not just in, providing ideas, but in kind of working through exactly what those controls should look like with us and being willing to be here and talk about it. But yeah, just the entire community providing the input that they have, and also to Mark for wrangling all of that, because he was absolutely kind of the head wrangler on the committee for pulling all that data together, for creating that monstrous spreadsheet, which I think had way more than 20 tabs, to kind of correlate all of that data and work through all of the changes. So yeah, I just want to say a big thanks to everybody for everything that they've done to participate in the process, and extend that as an invitation to everybody else out there that's involved in the crypto community and or getting involved in the crypto community to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how it comes together as a community, and how it's not, I don't know how you give feedback to like PCI DSS. If anyone can do so, send something in. I don't know exactly how that works, but I can think about, like, I had a question about FIPS and what FIPS 140 dash what, or is it -1, is it -2? And I sent a text to Will and was just asking him questions about FIPS, and like, just, it's really cool to have a group of people that you can just reach out to and feel like there are no dumb questions, because we're all doing this together and really trying to make this space as secure as possible, and crowdsourcing the information, then bringing it to experts who really understand it from different points of view. And if everyone had the same point of view, then there'd be no point of a committee. So it is good to have this discussion, the committee members, the advocacy groups. People definitely disagree with each other. And then we come to reach quorum, and then it's added, but it doesn't mean everyone always agrees with everything. But really, it is many minds that come together to make this happen. So I agree, Dirk. Thank you guys for what you've done for the standard so far. And I know that we're going to keep working on it and making improvements, and it'll just, more and more tabs to that spreadsheet. Lucky us. Any other concluding remarks anyone wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is like with Shanae, Demetro, and Will, we've got a Discord channel for the advocacy group, so we're in constant communication with each other. We pitch things, we pitch ideas, and so forth. I mean, you mentioned PCI DSS. It can take years for the standard to reflect changes within the industry. For example, PCI DSS had a thing where you actually had to change your password every 90 days. A lot of best practice out there says, well, this is actually cool. This significantly add to people regurgitating existing passwords, because they're tired of changing every 90 days and so forth. And it can take years for that to actually be reflected in the standard. Another one is like ISO standards. So I'm contributing to the ISO standards for blockchain and DLT. A typical standard can take 3 to 4 years to be actually published, because you've got this at the country level, where you've got countries deciding in terms of, should we use this word or not. The power of CCSS is that the rapidness which new requirements and changes to the standard can come out is unprecedented in other standards. For example, I mean, version 9 is a massive change from 8.1. and that was turned over in half a year. This and other information security standards or other standards in general, this could take years and years to actually turn around. But because of the fast nature and the rapid changes of technology in this space, the standard has to be incredibly responsive to changes. And this is where the power of CCSS really comes in. Very fast, very agile, and community driven. It's definitely an information security standard that's keeping up with the changes to technology.
If you want to compare the updating timeline for the CCSS and other standards, just let's remember that for ISO 27001, we got the term of the cloud infrastructure only in 2022 version, comparing to 2015 and 2013. So, yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, I appreciate you guys saying that, because there's definitely a lot that goes into being able to keep up with the technology as it changes. And the other thing that I think is interesting is sometimes something is like peeking its head in and is like all anyone's talking about with some type of technology. And then within the Web3 community, it sort of dwindles away and is no longer this big thing. So it's about future proofing, making sure that what's relevant is actually going to stay relevant. And if it didn't, making that change more quickly. So there's definitely pluses and minuses to it, but I think it comes together to create this standard that's really well done and is as relevant as possible. And we'll keep doing that, and we'll do a better and better job as we continue to get more feedback from more people in the community. So please bug us, send us stuff, become a part of what we're doing. So we can keep making it better, because really it is all about us not having these huge hacks happen. We don't want to keep seeing things like FTX. I know that that was a bit ago now, but still on the mind, because I just finished reading Mark's new implementation guide for V9. And in it, you wrote something brilliant, I thought, Mark, where you said something like, would you have wanted FTX to do their own self-assessment using the CCSS? Or if you were a stakeholder, would you have wanted a third-party auditor to be the one doing that? Because you can't trust the internal company if they're already the ones doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So there needs to be this outside auditor who is not going to say yes and, check things off just because. They're actually going to do the things that are needed to check if the system is secure. And for the record, FTX would not have passed CCSS. I don't know what their self-assessment would have done, but no auditor would have given them a pass. But then we've got that peer review, checking the auditor. So there's this system in place, and it all starts with the community building the standard. So I think what we have here is incredible, and I'm really grateful to everyone who watched this and everyone who's participating in the standard as a whole. And I'm excited to see where we go next with this, including a follow-up live stream where perhaps we'll have different members, perhaps we'll have the same folks on, but we can talk about some of the additional changes. I know Mark alluded to the addition of single signer. I don't think we really got into that fully, but that's been added. We also have some new requirements related to physical security and personnel and training. And we can also talk more about what the process looks like, maybe do some screen sharing with this spreadsheet that now that I've brought it up, I'm sure everyone watching is like, I got to see this spreadsheet. What could be more exciting? So I won't let you down with that. Any other closing remarks before we say goodbye for the day?
So I think we reached consensus, actually.
All right. Thank you guys for joining. I so appreciate your time. I know you're all busy people doing audits and many other things. So thank you for joining. Thanks to those who are watching, and we will